Hello， 大家好，这是一段使用 NotebookLM 所生成的英文语音摘要，主要是根据一份讨论 PCBA 发生硫化污染问题的 Podcast 内容，其缘由起始于一位网友在论坛上面的提问。该网友发现电路板上面的通孔零件引脚周围出现了疑似污染，而且EDS分析显示存在硫化物，怀疑是 PCB 板厂制程中硫酸未清洗干净所导致。工作熊之所以想分享这段语音，是因为它听起来一点也没有一般 AI 语音的生涩感与机械音。套句网络上面的用语就是丝滑，老实说还蛮让人觉得惊艳的，至少工作熊个人此时就觉得很惊艳。下面我们就来听听这段语音吧。
Okay, get this. We've got a real head scratcher for you today.
Oh.
Picture this.
Okay.
A batch of circuit boards suddenly showing signs of sulfur contamination. But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
It's only some of the boards.
Interesting.
And the source of the contamination is a complete mystery.
Oh, I like this already.
We're diving into a forum discussion where engineers are trying to crack the case. And let me tell you, it's like a digital whodunit.
Nice.
Think CSI,
Uh-huh.
but for electronics.
What's so interesting about this case is the way these engineers are thinking.
Right.
They're using photos, EDS analysis reports, and a whole lot of collective brain power to try and pinpoint what went wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like watching a team of detectives piecing together clues, and it really gets you thinking, what would you do if you were in charge of production?
Right.
And suddenly faced this kind of problem?
Yeah, good question.
Where would you even begin?
Well, the first step is understanding the problem.
Okay.
And in this case, it starts with a simple forum post.
Got it.
A user lays out the situation. Sulfur contamination.
Okay.
Confirmed by EDS analysis. But here's the catch.
What's that?
Other boards stored in the same warehouse are perfectly fine.
Okay.
There's no obvious smoking gun in the production process.
So naturally, they jump to the most obvious conclusion.
Yeah.
The PCB manufacturer messed up, right?
Right.
Maybe they didn't clean the boards properly.
That's the initial assumption.
Okay.
But as with most mysteries, it's rarely that straightforward.
Yeah.
And that's where the forum really comes alive.
Okay.
Other engineers chime in,
Yeah.
throwing out theories like seasoned detectives at a crime scene.
Ooh, I like it.
One engineer even suggests that the culprit could be silver components,
Oh, really?
notorious for reacting with sulfur.
Ah, Silver, the drama queen of the electronics world.
Right.
But this is where it gets a little tricky, right? Because we're not just talking about any old sulfur contamination. There's sulfur corrosion,
Yes.
and then there's sulfur creep.
Okay.
Two terms that often get confused.
Right.
Could you break those down for us?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Imagine sulfur corrosion as a slow, steady process, like rust slowly eating away at metal. Visually, you might see discoloration or tarnishing on the surface of the affected components.
Okay, so that's sulfur corrosion, the quiet, insidious types.
Yeah.
What about sulfur creep?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that the more dramatic one?
Exactly.
Right.
Sulfur creep is the showman of the two.
All right.
Think of it like tiny branching tendrils of corrosion.
Wow.
Creeping out from silver-plated components.
Interesting.
It's visually distinct. You can actually see these little pathways of destruction spreading across the board.
So the original poster thought they were dealing with sulfur creep, but maybe not.
Right.
Yeah.
The user hasn't actually observed those telltale creep patterns.
Ah, interesting.
What they're describing and what the photos show is a more general contamination.
Okay.
And that's where our in-house expert, mirroring the analysis from our source material, steps in and starts asking some really insightful questions.
Like what?
They want to know more about the affected parts. What type are they?
Okay.
What about the storage environment?
Makes sense.
They're approaching this like a detective gathering evidence, refusing to jump to conclusions without the full picture.
And that's when we get a plot twist.
What?
The user drops a bombshell.
Oh.
They're actually the SMT manufacturer,
What?
not the PCB maker.
Wow.
Plus, they've got detailed EDS reports from the affected areas.
Okay.
And admit the storage conditions weren't exactly ideal.
Uh-oh.
Think more humid basement
Oh,
than
boy.
climate-controlled facility.
This completely changes the game.
Right.
Now the focus shifts to the SMT process,
Okay.
not just the PCB itself.
And those less than perfect storage conditions.
Yeah.
Well, they just added another layer of complexity to the mystery.
It's like the investigation just took a sharp turn down a dark alley.
Right.
So what does our expert make of all this new information?
They dive right into those EDS reports.
Okay.
Scrutinizing every detail. Remember, EDS analysis tells you what elements are present,
Right.
but not necessarily where they came from.
Okay.
They notice something peculiar,
Wow.
a surprisingly high carbon content.
Interesting.
This raises a red flag because it suggests that the contamination might be coming from something other than the PCB itself.
Like what?
Think organic materials,
Okay.
maybe even something from the environment.
Okay, so we've got this intriguing carbon clue. But before we get too carried away,
Yeah.
can we pause for a second?
Sure.
You mentioned EDS analysis.
Uh-huh.
Can you remind us exactly what that is?
Yeah.
And more importantly, what are its limitations?
Of course.
Yeah.
Imagine EDS like a fingerprint scanner for materials.
Okay.
You point a beam of electrons at a sample, and it tells you what elements are present.
Got it.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
EDS is great for identifying elements, but it can't always tell you the source of those elements or their chemical bonds.
Right.
It's like knowing someone was at a crime scene because you found their fingerprints,
Yeah.
but not knowing what they were doing there.
So it's a powerful tool, but it doesn't give us the whole story.
Right.
And in this case, it seems like we need more than just fingerprints.
Precisely.
Oh.
And our expert actually suggests a couple of other techniques that could help shed more light on this mystery.
Oh, really?
FTIR and XPS.
Okay.
Think of FTIR as a molecular detective.
Okay.
It analyzes the way infrared light interacts with a material to identify specific chemical bonds.
Okay.
So not only would we know what elements are there, but we'd get clues about their chemical makeup. So it's like going from a fingerprint to a full DNA profile.
Exactly.
Cool. What about XPS? What's that one all about?
XPS takes things even further. It's like an ultra-high-resolution microscope
Oh, wow.
that can not only tell you what elements are present on the surface, but also their chemical states.
Got it.
So we could potentially pinpoint the exact source of the contamination based on its unique chemical signature.
Wow, those are some serious investigative tools.
Right.
So, armed with all this new information and a toolbox full of high-tech analysis techniques, our expert starts piecing together the puzzle.
Okay.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Tell me more.
Because they start to unravel that initial assumption about sulfur creep.
Right.
Yeah.
And they do this systematically, like a true detective dismantling a flawed theory. They compare the user's photos with an actual image of sulfur creep, highlighting the stark visual differences.
They also explain why the lack of voltage in storage makes creep highly unlikely in this case.
Right.
Remember, sulfur creep usually needs an electrical potential to occur. It's like trying to start a fire without a spark.
So we can officially rule out sulfur creep.
Yeah.
But if it's not creep, then what is it?
Yeah.
Time for some expert-level deduction.
Based on the EDS data,
Okay.
which shows elements like tin, barium, silicon, and, of course, sulfur.
Okay.
Our expert narrows it down to 3 possible scenarios.
Okay, let's hear it.
First, rework with aggressive flux that wasn't cleaned properly.
Yeah.
Second, a contaminated solder bath during wave soldering.
Interesting.
And third, a one-time contamination event. Maybe a spilled liquid.
Okay.
Improper cleaning, who knows?
Yeah.
It could be something completely unexpected.
Ooh. I love a good mystery with multiple suspects.
Right.
But you're saying these are just educated guesses, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Not definitive answers.
And that's a crucial point. We're still dealing with incomplete information.
Right.
It's like we're peering through a foggy window, trying to make out the shapes on the other side.
Yeah.
We have some clues, but the full picture remains elusive.
Man, this case is giving me serious detective vibes.
I know, right?
But wait a minute, before we get too deep into those 3 scenarios, didn't you say something earlier about the expert wanting to know more about the corroded copper areas?
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
That's another interesting wrinkle in this case.
Right.
Remember how the EDS analysis focused on the specific areas where the contamination was visible? Well, it turns out they didn't analyze the corroded copper areas themselves.
Hold on, why not?
Yeah.
Wouldn't those areas be crucial to understanding what's going on?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
And our expert actually points this out, emphasizing the importance of analyzing the right spots. If you're looking in the wrong place, you might miss crucial clues. It's like searching for a lost key under a streetlight, just because that's where the light is, even though you dropped it somewhere else.
Okay, that makes sense.
So what you're saying is, even though we have all this data, we might be missing a critical piece of the puzzle because the wrong areas were analyzed.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's where our investigation hits a snag.
What do you mean?
Remember how the user dropped those bombshells about being the SMT manufacturer and having the EDS reports?
Yeah.
Well, after that, they went completely silent.
Oh, no.
No follow-up, no updates, no answers.
Wait, seriously, they just vanished.
I know.
But we were so close to cracking the case.
I know, right?
It's frustrating.
It is.
But also incredibly realistic in the real world of engineering.
Yeah.
You don't always get a neat and tidy conclusion.
Right.
Sometimes you have to make decisions with incomplete information.
So we're left with these tantalizing clues, a handful of suspects.
Yeah.
No resolution.
Man, I hate cliffhangers.
Don't worry, we'll revisit those 3 possible scenarios in a bit.
Okay.
But first, let's take a step back and reflect on what we've learned so far.
Yeah, good idea.
Because even though we don't have a definitive answer, this case has already revealed some important insights.
Okay. This case really highlights how seemingly minor factors,
Like what?
like storage conditions or even a one-time event, can have a huge impact on PCBA reliability.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a reminder that we need to consider the entire life cycle of a product.
Right.
Not just the manufacturing process itself.
You know, it's something I hadn't really considered before.
Really?
We often think of manufacturing as this controlled environment.
Yeah.
But there's so many variables that come into play once a product leaves the factory.
Absolutely. And this case also underscores the importance of collaboration and diverse perspectives.
That's a good point.
Remember those initial theories from the other engineers in the forum?
Yeah, I do.
They might not have been spot on.
True.
But they helped broaden the investigation and challenged assumptions.
It was like a virtual brainstorming session.
Yeah.
A bunch of engineers pooling their knowledge and experience to try and crack the case.
Right.
It's amazing how much collective wisdom can emerge from a simple forum post.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's what makes these deep dives so valuable.
What do you mean?
It's not just about solving one particular mystery.
Okay.
It's about learning how to approach these kinds of technical challenges.
I see.
What questions should we be asking?
Right.
What tools can we use?
Okay.
What pitfalls should we avoid?
It's like a masterclass in engineering problem solving with a real-world case study to bring it all to life.
I like that.
But speaking of problem solving, we're still left with those 3 possible scenarios our expert outlined.
Yeah.
Rework with aggressive flux.
Okay.
A contaminated solder bath. Or a one-time contamination event.
Yeah.
Now, I'm dying to know, how would you have investigated each of those if the original poster hadn't gone silent?
Well, let's start with the rework hypothesis.
Okay.
If I suspected that rework was the culprit, I'd want to know everything about that process.
Okay. Like what?
What kind of flux did they use? Were
Right.
there any deviations from standard cleaning procedures?
Right.
I'd also examine the affected areas under a microscope, looking for any telltale signs of rework.
Like what?
Like residual flux or solder splatter.
So it's a combination of digging into the process documentation and getting up close and personal with those boards.
Right.
It's fascinating how even tiny details can reveal so much.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the contaminated solder bath?
Now, investigating a contaminated solder bath, that's a whole different beast.
Okay.
I'd need to analyze samples of the solder itself, searching for traces of those contaminants identified in the EDS reports.
Makes sense.
I'd also pore over the bath's maintenance logs, looking for any red flags, anything out of the ordinary.
So it's like tracing a polluted river back to its source.
Yeah.
You're not just looking at the contamination itself, you're trying to understand the entire system that led to it.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And then there's the one-time contamination event.
Right.
This one is tricky because it could be anything.
Yeah, that's true.
A spilled drink, a rogue cleaning agent, even something airborne.
Oh, wow.
It's almost like trying to solve a crime with no witnesses.
You'd need some serious detective skills to crack that one.
I know, right?
But regardless of which scenario we're talking about, it all comes back to having the right data. Right.
Absolutely.
Like you mentioned earlier, analyzing the wrong areas can lead you down the wrong path entirely.
Exactly.
And that's why those corroded copper areas are so intriguing.
Yeah.
We don't know if they're directly related to the sulfur contamination or if it's something else that's entirely... But if we had analyzed those areas, we might have gained crucial insights.
It's true.
It really makes you think about the importance of choosing your analysis points carefully. It's not enough to just have data.
Right.
You need the right data.
Precisely.
And that's where those additional techniques, FTIR and XPS, could have been invaluable.
I agree.
Remember, FTIR can identify specific chemical bonds, potentially revealing the composition of the contamination.
Yeah.
And XPS gives you an incredibly detailed surface analysis, which could pinpoint the source of those contaminants.
It's like having a whole arsenal of forensic tools at your disposal.
But even with all that technology, we're still left with an unsolved mystery in this case.
I know.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Are these kinds of manufacturing mysteries common?
I think so.
Or is this a particularly unusual case?
You know, I think these kinds of puzzles are more common than we realize.
Really?
In a complex manufacturing environment, there are so many variables, so many potential points of failure.
That makes sense.
It's often a process of elimination, careful observation, and a healthy dose of detective work to figure out what went wrong.
So even with all our advanced technology and sophisticated analysis techniques, there's still an element of the unknown.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think that's what makes engineering so fascinating.
What do you mean?
It's not always about finding the right answer. It's about navigating uncertainty, making informed decisions with the data you have, and constantly learning and adapting.
And sometimes it's about knowing when to call in the experts, the forensic scientists, the material detectives, to help you crack those really tough cases.
Exactly.
Right.
This case really emphasizes the need for a multidisciplinary approach.
I see.
You might have electrical engineers, material scientists, process engineers, all working together to unravel a complex problem.
Speaking of those other techniques, I'm curious, when would you actually recommend using FTIR or XPS in a situation like this?
Oh, good question.
Are they standard tools in a manufacturing setting, or are they more specialized?
That's a great question.
Okay.
They're definitely more specialized. While EDS is common in many manufacturing labs for quick elemental analysis, FTIR and XPS are typically employed when you need deeper insights into the chemical composition and bonding of materials.
So if EDS is like a basic fingerprint scan, FTIR and XPS are the full DNA analysis you use them when you need to get really specific.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Wow.
In this case, FTIR could have helped identify the exact type of organic contaminant, while XPS could have potentially traced it back to its source by analyzing the chemical states of the elements involved.
It's incredible how much information you can extract from a seemingly simple problem. And it makes you realize how much goes on behind the scenes in manufacturing.
What do you mean?
The intricate processes, the meticulous analysis, the constant pursuit of quality and reliability.
Absolutely. And even though we didn't get a definitive answer in this particular case, I think there's still a lot we can learn from it.
For sure.
It's
a reminder that engineering is a constantly evolving field. And there's always more to learn, more mysteries to unravel, and more challenges to conquer. You know, it's funny. We started this deep dive thinking we'd solve a contamination mystery, but we ended up with even more questions than answers. But I have to say, the journey itself has been incredibly insightful.
I agree.
I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the complexities of PCBA manufacturing and the challenges engineers face every day.
It's a tough job.
It is.
This case really highlights the importance of thorough investigation, critical thinking, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty.
That's a good point.
It's not always about finding the perfect solution, but rather about making the best decision with the information you have.
And sometimes it's about knowing when to admit you don't have all the answers. And being open to new information and perspectives.
For sure.
But before we wrap up,
I
want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. The importance of communication.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial.
Remember how the original poster initially thought they were dealing with sulfur creep? But it turned out to be something else entirely?
Oh, absolutely. That's a classic example of how miscommunication can lead to confusion and wasted time. If they had described the problem more accurately from the start, those other engineers might have been able to pinpoint the root cause much sooner.
It's a good reminder that clear and precise communication is crucial in engineering.
I agree.
Especially when dealing with complex technical issues.
For sure.
You need to be able to describe the problem accurately. Ask the right questions. And understand the nuances of the terminology being used.
Couldn't agree more.
And it's not just about the initial problem description.
Yeah, right.
It's also about documenting your processes.
Okay.
Keeping detailed records. And being able to communicate your findings effectively to others.
It's all about good communication.
So what does this all mean for our listener?
That's a good question.
What are the key takeaways they can apply to their own work?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Yeah. Even in a world of advanced technology and sophisticated analysis tools,
Right.
engineering is still a human endeavor.
That's a good point.
It's about observation, deduction, collaboration, and a constant willingness to learn.
It's about embracing those aha moments when you finally understand a complex concept.
Yeah.
But also about being comfortable with those lingering questions that keep you curious and engaged.
Exactly. And remember, every challenge, every mystery, every unsolved case is an opportunity to expand your knowledge and hone your problem-solving skills.
So even though our deep dive into this sulfur contamination case left us with some unresolved questions, I think we can all agree that it's been a valuable and thought-provoking journey.
Absolutely.
And for our listeners, I'd love to leave them with a final thought.
Okay, sure.
Think back to this case. What additional testing or information would you have wanted to see?
Good question.
What questions would you have asked?
Right.
And how could you apply those insights to your own work to prevent similar mysteries from popping up in the future?
That's something to think about.
That's a great challenge.
Yeah, it is.
And remember, we're always here to dive deep into your questions and help you unravel those engineering mysteries.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Deep Dive.
It's been fun.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming.